and supplement the record with information that bears directly on a number of the findings that were included in that report. I also intend to make a submission to the New York State Assembly Judiciary Committee, which has decided earlier this week that they will be continuing to review the evidence that the Attorney General gathered and issuing their own report. And that's why it is critically important that the Attorney General address some of the material omissions, errors, and record that are contained within that report. Now, I've spoken twice about this, and I've done PowerPoints on August 6th, and then I did another one on August 10th, that addressed some of the issues and some of the fairness issues with respect to that report. I'm not a politician, I'm a lawyer, and I focus on facts, I focus on evidence, and I focus on the law. And that's what I'm concerned about, and that's what my submissions are going to address. One thing that hasn't changed since August 3rd, or since I last spoke publicly about this, is that I still haven't been given access to the evidence. There are 79,000 documents that were gathered. There were 179 interviews conducted, including 41 transcribed and 138 for which I assume there are memos. I have not been given access to any of that material, despite having made requests to the Assembly Judiciary Committee and to the Attorney General. I will renew those requests as I attempt to put forward a fulsome submission on the governor's behalf. Today I want to talk about some information that we have learned since the governor spoke with you on August 10th, and that we've learned by going over some of the facts in the report. It is a lengthy report, and there are hundreds of footnotes. But I want to hit on some moot points today that will be included in my submission to the Attorney General within the next week. The first is that one of the complainants in the report, that the report in the executive summary found that the governor had engaged in sexually harassing conduct with, was a woman by the name of Virginia Limmiatis. And the Attorney General's report talks about an incident 4 years ago that happened. And what the report found was that on May 24th, 2017, the governor was at a conservation event at Salmon River in New York, upstate New York. And Ms. Limmiatis, who was an employee for an energy company, had attended that event. And what the report said is that she joined a rope line at that event to meet the governor. And the report found that the governor had walked up close to Ms. Limmiatis and that he, quote, pressed his first two fingers of his right hand on each letter of the energy company's name, which had been printed across the chest of Ms. Limmiatis' t-shirt that day. The report also said that the governor leaned in so that his cheek was touching her cheek. And this is the report at pages 99 to 100, and I encourage you to take a look at this and judge for yourself. She said that she was shocked and appalled during this interaction with the governor when he pressed two fingers on his right hand against each letter in the logo on her chest. She told investigators that at the time of this interaction, she had understood that the governor knew he had, quote, done something wrong and made a comment about it. And then she said that the governor then continued down, quote, the rope line, and that she had looked to see if anyone else had noticed. When I last spoke with you, one of the points I made is that the report did not include any photographs that were taken from this event. There were hundreds of photos that were taken from that event, and those photos were in fact looked at by the Attorney General's investigators because it's referred to in a footnote of the Attorney General's report. And included in those hundreds of photos were photos of the governor with Ms. Limmiatis. The photos contradict and they undermine how the report made findings on this event and certainly the context in which they presented what had occurred. This is the first photo from the event where you can see Miss Limmiatis. She is in the corner where the arrow is pointing, and she is standing behind a woman, and she's waiting to meet the governor. But as you can see, this is not any type of a formal rope line. There were a lot of people around, and there was a photographer taking pictures of each of the governor's interactions. This next photo is the photo of the governor's interaction with Miss Limmiatis that day. And if you look at the photo, you will see that the governor's right hand and right arm are nowhere near Miss Limmiatis' chest, the logo on her t-shirt. She has her hand on the governor's shoulder. They are both smiling, laughing, and he has his left hand up in a way that brushes against her shoulder. This was not an incident with people looking on a rope line where he is taking his two right-hand fingers and touching each of the letter on her chest. And it doesn't make sense if you look at the photo that he would have done that. Here's the next photo as he's walking away from Miss Limmiatis at the interaction. And there's no indication, I think pictures speak 1,000 words, but you can judge for yourself if you look at pages 99 to 100 of the report and then this photo. Subsequent to these photos, Miss Limmiatis was at the event and had trailed the governor at points and was taking photos of him greeting others in what was an informal greeting. That number of people were coming up to the governor, and there were hundreds of photos taken. And there's Miss Limmiatis again behind the governor later on. All of those photos we are going to ask the Attorney General to include and supplement in the report. The public should see all of the photos taken from that event and make a judgment. And the Assembly should make a judgment for themselves about the governor's conduct that day and if the report fairly describes his interaction. The next issue I want to address is that the report talks about state entity employee number 1. And this particular individual has never been identified to me as the lawyer for the governor. I don't know who state entity employee number 1 is. Not identified in the report, and the report doesn't even identify what state entity this person works for. But what we do know is that the report, in a line which was a bit of a throwaway line, noted that she actually doesn't work for a state entity. This particular woman works for an entity that is affiliated with the state, okay? And again, we will be asking the Attorney General if we can get the name of this particular person to match it up with photos from the event. So what the report alleged is that sometime in September 2019, the governor was at an event and took a photo with this particular woman. The report doesn't give the date, but based on the governor's questions asked in the governor's testimony and my review of records, we've identified the event as having occurred on September 14th. It was a Revive Mother Nature event. It took place at Pier 40 on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. What the report said happened with this individual who works for some entity that is affiliated with the state is the report said at page 3, and I encourage everyone to look at this. The report said that as the governor took a photograph with this woman who works with the state-affiliated entity, the governor, quote, put his hand on state entity employee number 1's butt, tapped it twice, and then grabbed her butt. That is what the report found. The report also found that this was an incident that this woman, quote, contemporaneously memorialized in an email that she sent herself the very next day. So that would be September 15th, the day after the incident. But what was noticeable to me is that the report didn't quote from the email. Now that email is amongst the 3 appendices attached to the report that has 111 documents, not the 79,000 that were collected, but has 111 documents. And there's obviously a reason that the report didn't quote from the email, and we are going to ask that the Attorney General make this clear in her report. The email does not state that the governor grabbed her butt, this woman's butt. What the email states is that my boss and I stood on either side of Governor Cuomo, and we took a couple pictures with the governor's photographer. When departing from taking the picture, Governor Cuomo tapped my butt cheek 2 times, 2 quick pats, with what I felt to be the palm of the hand. That was her description. The report then says he grabbed her butt. That's not true. That's not recorded in a contemporaneous email, and we will ask the Attorney General to correct that record. We will also ask, with respect to that particular event, that the Attorney General's report includes some context for what this event was. Governor Cuomo attended that event with his daughter, Mariah. She was with him as he greeted people and moved throughout the event. There were 190 photographs taken outside at a very public event, and there were still cameras and there were video cameras that documented the governor's movements at that event. And nothing in the photos or the videos shows any untoward behavior by the governor. We are going to ask the Attorney General to include all the photographs from that event, to give context for what the event it was, that it was outside, that there were still cameras and video cameras there, and also to quote directly from the email and to retract the finding about the governor having grabbed this woman's butt. The next issue that we will bring to the Attorney General's attention is that, as you can probably imagine, that in the days after the report was issued, a lot of people reached out to the governor, and people also reached out to me as well. We have been given some new information that pertains to Ms. Bennett that relates to her credibility. I will not get into what the information is out of respect for Ms. Bennett, but this is information that we will be providing to the Attorney General and to the Assembly Judiciary Committee as they consider their report. With respect to Brittany Commisso, I've spoken about this a couple of times, and we do think it is incumbent upon the Attorney General to amend the August 3rd report and provide more information and more documentary evidence with respect to Ms. Commisso. The report concluded that the governor groped her breast in his office at the executive mansion on November 16th. And this is, again, something that was specifically stated by one of the Attorney General's investigators at the press conference. And to be clear, and I've been clear on this on behalf of my client, and my client has been clear, he never groped Ms. Commisso, not on November 16th or any other date. Contemporaneous state records and emails from November 16th, which the Attorney General did not collect, they do not in any way corroborate what Ms. Commisso first described to the Times-Union in April of 2021 about what happened that day, and they don't corroborate what the report concluded. Ms. Commisso has always stated that this groping incident happened in November of 2020. And after the report came out, and after I made a PowerPoint and comments about November 16th on Friday, August 6th, the Times-Union in a story on August 9th of 2021 reported that Ms. Commisso claims that this incident occurred around November 25th of 2020. State records confirm that the only day Ms. Commisso was at the executive mansion in November 2020 was November 16th. She was not at the mansion near or around November 25th. The Attorney General's report also concluded that Ms. Commisso had said that this incident occurred around the time she had to take a photograph of a document, and that she provided that photograph to the investigators, and we would ask the investigators for a copy of that photograph. We haven't been given it, but the photograph was dated November 16th. It is important that the report include the November 16th contemporaneous emails, that the report include Ms. Commisso's statements in an April 2021 press interview with the Times Union where she talks about what happened that day and it doesn't match up to the records. And the report also include the newly published claim in the Times Union that the incident occurred around November 2020. All of that must be included in this report for context, and it must be gathered by the Attorney General to the extent the Attorney General didn't get this. With respect to Lindsey Boylan, I've spoken somewhat about this, but to the extent the New York State Assembly or any other government agency is going to rely on the Attorney General's report as they consider evidence, as they make their own determinations, it is incumbent upon the chief legal officer of our state to include, first, a discussion about what communications took place between the Attorney General's office and Ms. Boylan's top political consultant in December 2020 after Ms. Boylan began tweeting about the governor and harassment. It is critically important to understand what they were saying within the campaign and what the Attorney General's office was being told about that. Secondly, the report should include a discussion on why Ms. Boylan's communications consultant resigned in December 2020 after the tweets were done. And if the Attorney General did not interview that person, that should be in the report as well. We will also ask that the report include the, quote, threatening and, quote, jarring message that Ms. Boylan sent to Howard Zemsky to coerce him to change his story about what happened on a flight with the governor. That was not included in the report, and it certainly bears upon the credibility of that aspect of what Ms. Boylan's saying. The public should know what that message said, and certainly as the governor's lawyer, I should know to the extent the report made findings. In addition, the report should also include, and it does not now, the circumstances surrounding Ms. Boylan's 2018 departure from her state employment. That became critical to all of the events that happened afterwards, and that has to be included in a report that's going to be fulsome and that people are going to look to and rely upon. And finally, the report must include specific testimony from witnesses that told the Attorney General's investigators why they didn't believe Ms. Boylan's allegations about sexual harassment in the governor's office to be credible, why they did not believe what she was saying. And I know of at least one witness that gave a very, very specific example. To the extent the report includes a discussion of witnesses who found certain witnesses credible, it is incumbent that it be fulsome on the other side as well. That is a fair report, and that's a report that the public and the Assembly can rely upon. The last piece of information I'll share with you today, and there will be more that is in our submission to the Attorney General, but that the report has to include evidence that was favorable to the governor that the investigators were told about. On page 121 of the report, it states, and I quote, "A number of former and current executive chamber staff, particularly the senior staff as well as state troopers on the protection detail, they denied having witnessed or experienced any conduct by the governor that could be characterized as sexual or otherwise inappropriate." And they interviewed, the Attorney General's investigators, staff members who had worked for the governor for years and had contact with him on a daily basis. The report doesn't identify who the witnesses were, the number of witnesses that said this, and what they said. and what they had to say about key allegations, what they thought about the environment. And that is critical, which is why, again, I will ask for access to all of the informal interviews, which I would hope memos were made of those, as well as the transcripts. We expect to make a submission to the Assembly. Before I do that on behalf of the governor, I will make this submission to the Attorney General's office asking that the report be made fulsome, that it be made complete, and that the material omissions that were left out be put in. The public should be able to see this, and as should any government official that is looking at this case and trying to understand the thoroughness of the investigation and the fairness and accuracy of the findings. So you can expect that from me within the next week. I really appreciate your time today.